Of course, here's a rewritten and polished version of your text. I'll stay true to your original story and voice, but make it flow cleaner, sharper, and more professional, without losing that raw, emotional impact you captured. I'm Callum Ridgway. I'm 33 years old, and 3 months ago I thought my life was pretty good. Back then, if you'd asked me, I would have said my marriage to Marissa was solid, something I could be proud of. 7 years together, and I thought we'd figured out how to make it work despite the differences. She came from a world of old money, private schools, family names that carried weight. I came from a blue-collar background. My dad a mechanic, my mom a nurse, where we never had much beyond what we needed. When we met, I was just a guy fixing computers. She was this bright, beautiful woman who didn't seem to care where I came from. I thought we were equals. Or at least, I convinced myself we were. Looking back, the cracks were always there, just waiting to split wide open. Her family, especially her mother, Blee, and her older brother, Gregory, never liked me. They smiled, sure, but it was the kind of smile that never touched their eyes. Marissa used to brush it off. "They'll come around, Callum. Just give them time." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But 7 years is a long time to wait for people to stop treating you like dirt under their polished shoes. Things had been tense for a while, small arguments, minor frustrations, but nothing we couldn't handle. At least, not until the annual family reunion in New York. Marissa begged me to go, said it would be different this time. Said they'd finally see me for who I was. Honestly, I would have rather stayed home fixing a dozen broken laptops. But I went. For her. The estate was massive. An old colonial house perched on a cliff, with winding staircases and cold, echoing halls. It was beautiful in a way that made you feel small, like you didn't belong unless you were born there. From the second we arrived, I felt it, the weight of their stairs. Blee greeted me with a handshake so limp I barely felt it, and Gregory smirked like he already knew how the weekend would end. Every conversation was a minefield. I'd say something simple, like how nice the weather was, and Blee would correct me. "Unseasonably warm for this time of year," she'd say, as if I'd committed a crime. Gregory would chime in with his usual jabs, questioning my job, my choices, my worth. I'd laugh it off, try to keep the peace. But inside, it was killing me. Marissa kept telling me to relax. They don't mean anything by it, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew they did. By the second day, I was counting the hours until we could leave. I stayed polite, kept my head down, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. It just kept slipping away. Dinner that night was the breaking point. We gathered around a long, polished table, candles flickering, silverware clinking. Marissa squeezed my hand under the table like she was rooting for me. For a second, I felt okay. Then Gregory started in again, louder this time. Blee joined him, picking apart everything from the way I sat to the shirt I wore. I could feel the room closing in, all those eyes waiting for me to slip, and maybe I was just tired of pretending it didn't hurt. Maybe I wanted to prove something, to them, to Marissa, to myself, so I stood up, cleared my throat, gave a toast. I spoke about gratitude, about how lucky I felt to be part of the family, kept it short, simple, nothing fancy. But halfway through, a few cousins started laughing, quiet, mean chuckles that spread like a ripple across the table. My face burned. I tried to finish, tried to salvage it, but then Blah stood up, slow and deliberate. "We don't tolerate tantrums at this table, Callum," she said, her voice cold enough to freeze the room. Tantrums. I looked to Marissa, waiting, begging for her to defend me, to say something, anything. But she just stared at her wine. Glass, swirling it like it had all the answers I didn't. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just fighting her family anymore. I was fighting her too. The rest of the dinner dragged on, voices rising again, forks scraping plates like nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shifted. Something I couldn't unfeel. Back in our guest room, Marissa and I finally exploded. She crossed her arms, perched on the edge of the bed, and asked, "What was that, Callum?" Like I was the one who ruined everything. "I've had enough," I said, pulling off my tie like it was a noose. "I'm done with this." "You're too sensitive," she snapped. "They were just joking." Just joking. 7 years of slights, sneers, and fake smiles, and I was supposed to just deal with it. "I'm your husband," I said, voice low and shaking, "not their punching bag." But she didn't flinch, didn't soften, just crossed her arms tighter. "You have 2 options, Callum," she said. "Apologize or leave." I froze. Apologize. Or leave. I stared at her, waiting for her to back down, to realize what she was asking, but she didn't. And for the first time in years, I saw it clearly. She had already chosen them over me. "Okay," I said. Steady. Final. I grabbed my bag, threw in a few shirts, my jeans, my toothbrush. She didn't stop me. Didn't even move. At the door, she finally asked, "You're really doing this?" I didn't turn around. "Yeah, I am." The night swallowed me as I drove away, the estate shrinking in the rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was headed, just that I wasn't staying. 2 hours down the highway, I spotted a small regional airport, a blinking sign, a low building. I pulled in, walked up to the counter, asked, "What's the next flight out?" "Oregon," the guy said. "Leaves in 40 minutes. I'd never been there. Didn't know anyone. Didn't care. I'll take it." 40 minutes later, I was on a small plane, staring out the window as the ground fell away. My phone stayed off. No calls, no texts, no pleading voices. When we landed, I rented a beat-up car and drove toward the coast. No plan except to keep moving until I hit water. I found a cheap motel near the beach with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. The room was tiny, the air smelled like salt and old carpet, and the walls were thin enough to hear the ocean. But it was mine. I lay there, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the waves, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't anyone's project or disappointment. I was just me. Oregon was a blank slate, and this time, I wasn't going back. Would you also like me to do a more cinematic or novel-style version if you're aiming to use this for a script, audiobook, or short story project? Just say the word. I can create an even more vivid, slightly dramatized rewrite, too. Of course. Here's your rewritten version, keeping the tone, flow, and emotions intact but tightening the structure, clarifying action, and smoothing the language for better pacing and impact. It was beautiful. Not loud, not showy, just steady, like it didn't need to prove anything. 18:18 on the clock, and I found myself in a small town, the kind with one main street and a handful of shops that looked like they'd been there forever. In the window of one of them, "Studio for rent, $600 month." I pulled over, called the number, and met Tom, a guy who smelled faintly of fish. After handing over the first month's rent in cash, he gave me the keys. The studio wasn't much. One room with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and if you leaned out the window just right, a glimpse of the water. But it was mine. I dropped my bag on the floor, sat down on the lumpy couch, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That first day, I walked down to the beach, hands in my pockets, the wind tugging at my jacket, the cold sand shifting under my shoes. The waves rolled in slow and sure, like they were telling me, "Take your time." I felt lighter than I had in years, like all the weight of Marissa's family, their rules, and their judgment had stayed behind in New York. I picked up some freelance, IT work online, simple jobs I could do from anywhere, and bought groceries from a little market where the cashier smiled like I was already a regular. Life was simple, and simple was exactly what I needed. By day 3, the cracks started to show. I'd kept my phone off, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, had got the better of me. I powered it up, and the screen lit up like a storm. Voicemails from Marissa, a nasty text from Gregory. "You're a real piece of work." A long message from her mother, full of accusations about how I'd disgraced the family. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't read the whole messages. I didn't need to. I already knew the script. Their blame, their outrage, their certainty that I was the problem. I scrolled through, deleted the endless family group chats Marissa had wedged me into, brunch plans, etiquette lectures, all of it. And the phone felt cleaner after that, like I'd scraped off a layer of grime. Calls kept coming. Marissa, Gregory, numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear the panic, the guilt trips, the fury. I already knew what they'd say. I sat down at the tiny kitchen table, opened my laptop, and wrote a short email to Marissa. "I'm safe. I'm not coming back. If you need to contact me, go through my lawyer." I didn't even have a lawyer yet, but I would. I hit send, closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared up at the ceiling. No apology? No explanations. No room for her to pull me back in. The phone buzzed again, but I turned it off and threw it on the couch. Outside, the sky was turning pink over the water. I stepped onto the balcony and breathed in the salt-heavy air. Seagulls cried in the distance. A boat hummed somewhere out on the horizon. This was my life now. Quiet. Mine. Nobody else's rules. I didn't know how long it would last, didn't know what they'd do next, but for the first time, in years I had peace, real peace. Not just the absence of noise, the absence of them. Their voices, their judgment. I'd walked away, and I wasn't looking back. I'm Callum Ridgway, and after a week in Oregon, it wasn't just the dust settling around me, it was settling inside me too. Every morning I woke to the sound of waves, made coffee in a chipped mug I found at a thrift store, sat at my table, picked up small jobs to keep the lights on. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Back in New York, I could only imagine what they were saying about me. Marissa's family had a gift for spinning themselves into victims. He abandoned us. He's unstable. He cracked under pressure. I didn't have to guess. I'd lived with it for years. I could picture them around that big dining table, sipping expensive wine, picking me apart like vultures. But I wasn't there to hear it anymore. That was the best part. I had my own witnesses. My sister, Ellie, who'd seen me shrink under Marissa's family's thumb. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" she used to ask. And Dorian, my best friend since college, who once told me bluntly, "You're not yourself around them, man." They were right. They saw me losing myself long before I did. And now that I was gone, I could feel pieces of myself coming back. Together. Marissa didn't file for divorce immediately. I wasn't surprised. She wasn't the type to make the first move. Her mother, Blay, probably whispered to her that I'd come crawling back. They always do. But I didn't. Days turned into weeks. No calls, no texts, no apologies. Just that one email. "I'm safe. I'm not coming back. Speak to my lawyer." Every day I stayed gone, I felt stronger. I kept my phone off most of the time, turning it on only to check in with Ellie or Dorian. The air here was clean, salty, pine sharp, and it filled my lungs like it was scrubbing out the years I'd spent holding my breath. I walked the beach every morning, hands in my pockets, letting the waves smooth out the rough edges inside me. I didn't need much. Just my little place, my work, and the quiet. I thought about my mom sometimes. How she raised Ellie and me alone after Dad died. She never apologized for who she was. Never bent to fit someone else's idea of good. Enough. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that. But I was remembering now. 2 months after landing in Oregon, I knew I had to go back. Not to stay. Not to fix anything. just to reclaim the small things that mattered. My dad's old watch, my mom's books, a few childhood photos with Ellie. Things too important to leave buried in Marissa's world. I booked a cheap flight to New York, rented a car at the airport, drove to the condo early on a gray Tuesday morning. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I wanted it clean, in and out. The building was just as I remembered, sleek, cold, too shiny for comfort. I still had my key. The door swung open, and that sterile, expensive smell hit me like a slap. No coats on the rack, no shoes by the door. Good. I could move fast. I grabbed boxes from the closet, started packing the books, the watch, the photos. It was strange being there without Marissa's voice in the background, without her watching me like I was about to screw something up. I was halfway through when the front door clicked open behind me. I froze, a photo frame in my hand, and turned around. Marissa stood in the doorway, small in her designer coat, looking more shaken than I'd ever seen her. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, but her eyes were wide. "Callum," she said, voice barely a whisper. I nodded, kept packing. "Just getting my stuff." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She looked around like she barely recognized the place without me in it. "You really meant it," she said, not a question. "Yeah," I said, not looking up. "Of course. Here's a rewritten, polished version of your piece while keeping all your original emotion, style, and voice, but making it flow more smoothly and powerfully." She moved closer, her boots clicking on the hardwood, and I could feel her trying to figure me out, like she always did. "We can fix this," she said, her voice slipping into that practiced tone she used when she thought she could talk me into anything. I shook my head, slow and sure, and kept packing. "No, we can't." She went quiet. For a second, I thought maybe she'd leave. But she didn't. She just stood there, arms crossed tight like she was holding herself together, watching me fold a shirt. "You didn't even try," she said finally, her voice sharper now, anger creeping in like I'd been waiting for. I stopped, looked her dead on, and said, "I tried for 7 years, Marissa. You didn't." Her mouth opened, then closed like she didn't know how to argue with that. I turned back to the box, stacking photos, feeling the air between us get heavier. "You never fought for me," I said, steady even though it hurt. "You fought to keep me quiet, to keep me in line, to keep them happy. But you never fought for me." She flinched, just a little. And for a moment, something flickered. In her eyes, guilt maybe or realization, but it vanished fast. "That's not fair," she said, but her voice was small like she didn't believe it herself. I shrugged, taping up the box. "Maybe not, but it's true." I picked up the second box and moved to the living room. Some old records, a mug I liked, and she followed, hovering like she wanted to stop me but didn't know how. "What am I supposed to tell them?" she asked. I knew she meant her family. "Whatever you want," I said without looking up. "I don't care anymore." That hit her. I could feel it. But I kept packing. 2 boxes and a bag. That's all it took to leave 7 years behind. She stood there, coat on, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Callum," she said, one last try. I shook my head again. "I'm done, Marissa. Take care." I walked past her, down the hall to the elevator. She didn't follow, didn't call after me. When the doors closed, I felt that weight lift off my chest. I drove straight to the airport, shipped the boxes to Oregon, and caught the next flight out. Back on the coast, I landed under a sky full of stars, the ocean waiting like an old friend. That last visit didn't change anything. It just closed a door I'd already walked through. She still didn't get it. She thought it was about fixing something broken. It wasn't. It was about letting go, I'm Callum Ridgway. After that trip to New York, I started building something real. Not just a life, a version of myself I thought I'd lost. The boxes arrived a few days later. I unpacked them slow, setting my mom's books on a secondhand shelf, hanging a photo of me and Ellie by the couch. My dad's watch stayed boxed up. I wasn't ready for that yet. The studio by the coast started to feel like home. I picked up freelancing work, fixing tech problems online, but soon pushed it further. Flyers at the coffee shop, the hardware store, word spread. Small businesses liked that I showed up, got the job done, and didn't overcomplicate things. Out here, nobody cared who I'd been married to. Nobody cared about my last name or my bank account. They cared that I was real. And slowly, brick by brick, I started rebuilding myself. Pete, a fisherman with hands like sandpaper, nodded at me over coffee like we'd known each other forever. Sarah at the coffee shop would slip me an extra muffin, smiling, saying, "You look like you could use it." They didn't ask about the past. They just made space for me in their lives. Ellie and I started talking again. I called her one night after settling in. She picked up on the first ring. "Callum, you're alive," she said, laughing. I told her about the ocean, the studio, the work. She said she was proud of me, and I believed her. I started hiking on weekends, breathing in the sharp air off the cliffs. One Saturday, I stopped by the shelter and came home with a scruffy dog whose ear stuck up funny. I named him Booker. No reason, it just fit. He followed me everywhere, asking for nothing but food, a pat, a quick run on the beach. Simple, steady, exactly what I needed. At night, we'd sit on the balcony, listening to the waves, watching stars punch through the sky. Work picked up. I was consulting full-time now, helping local shops troubleshoot networks. People relied on me, and it grounded me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I'd traded the polished floors of that Manhattan condo for creaky wood, the city's noise for the ocean's hum. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was mine. Then, months later, the past crept back, not with a crash, but a whisper. An email from Marissa. No subject, just a few sad lines. "I see it now, Callum. I was so busy trying to keep them happy that I didn't see I was losing you. I'm sorry." I read it twice. Sat there, coffee cold in my hands. Booker nosed at my leg, but I just stared at the screen. It wasn't anger that hit me. That had burned out months ago. It was just tiredness. Where was this clarity when I was standing there packing my life into 2 boxes? I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because silence was the truest answer I could give. Later, a letter arrived, thick paper that smelled like Blue's perfume. Marissa's mother. Cold, sharp, condemning. "You broke my daughter's heart. You abandoned your responsibilities." The words were full of blame, full of their version of the truth. I fed it to the shredder without a second thought. Those echoes, Marissa's regret, Blee's rage, kept coming for a while. But they didn't stick. I'd built too much here to be dragged back. Fishing trips with Pete, muffins and coffee with Sarah, hikes with Booker, late-night calls with Ellie, a small life, a good life. A year later, the divorce was final. The papers signed, sealed, done. I bought a modest place on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, a step up from the studio, but still simple, a porch, a view of forever. I wake early now, take Booker for walks along the shore, work from my sunlit kitchen table. No one expects anything of me except that I show up. No more bending, no more explaining, just living. Sometimes I think about Marissa. Wonder if she's still stuck in that world, still trying to keep Blay happy. I don't hate her, I don't even resent her. It's just over. She made her choice. I made mine. We're even now. I'm Callum Ridgway. I walked out of New York with nothing but 2 boxes and a one-way ticket to Oregon, and I've never looked back. I don't owe anyone my story. I don't owe anyone my apology. I built this life with my own two hands, and it's enough. Would you like me to also give you a slightly shortened version for an even tighter, more novel-like flow? Or help format it into clean chapters if you're planning to use this for a book or blog?